So please, it's up to you. Okay, I guess we can get started. We are recording this session, so you can watch it over and over again. It keeps alive. Why don't we start with our introductions? Mike, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for coming to our session. I'm Mike Siebold. I've been with Tremco Construction Products Group. We're a materials manufacturer. We manufacture everything from roofing materials, clad, facade, below grade, and we really work on entire building envelope performance, and that's what brought me to NIBS a little over 25 years ago in building Tremco's relationship with NIBS and my personal relationship with NIBS. But NIBS has been a great opportunity of light thinkers. You know, we are the tip of the spear when it comes to building envelope performance. I know this conference is focused a lot on the infrastructure, but the whole BTEC section on NIBS, we still focus quite a bit on the enclosure. And when you talk about energy efficiency, indoor occupancy, comfort, right, indoor air quality, it all starts with the building envelope and how the buildings are constructed. And we'll hopefully share some innovation things that we've done at Tremco over the last 38 years and some of the futuristic that I do sit on all our leadership teams as well as our new product development as well as new business development. So the direction of it is where we talk about earthquakes or fires. You'll hear quite about fires today, I think. So with that,
We'll test it together.
Awesome. Pleasure to be here. My name is Garrett Moore, CEO and co-founder of a young company called Tecton OS. I'm the newcomer. I'm the baby in the room. Came to construction late. First act of my professional life was as a SEAL officer. So loved serving in the military. Got to see high-functioning teams. Went to go build a house myself. Did not see said function. Thought I could hack the system with prefabrication and just it snowballed. And in the course of that journey, I fell in love with the problem because I didn't have a solution in mind. So got out and started in 2018 a journey around prefabrication. Why are we not able to build better, faster, cheaper as a society? Why are we still building houses the same way we were 100 years ago? Why is the greatest innovation in housing the nail gun? Like, why have we not pushed the ball further? We're landing rockets on barges for crying out loud. So passionate about building better, faster, cheaper, passionate about moving the needle on housing affordability. I think that's so critical for my kids and for their kids and generations to come. So we'll nerd out about how this intersects with building science, et cetera, but just happy and excited to be here.
I think you're in a room full of nerds. Well, happy to join you.
So, thank you for having me. I'm Alex Haldeman. I'm with James Hardy Building Products. I'm a research and development manager there. Been with Hardy for about 3 years now. But been in and around the building materials and construction world for quite a while. Done everything from drive a forklift to draw houses, house designs, and really was emphasized in innovative materials and methods. So worked at a number of companies that explored new types of cements that you could use that were fire resistant, water resistant, all that. Did a lot of work in modular at many points in my career to like you, how do we make things better? How do we take these learnings and try to make them more efficient, make them easier to use, better to use? And with Hardy in the R&D department, I'm doing very similar as well. But I've expanded my scope to also include building codes and standards because some of the problems I encountered in prior jobs, one of the not struggles, but one of the issues we encountered was a lot of these innovative materials aren't in codes yet. So part of the roadblock was getting those codes and standards up to date to match the innovation that's happening. So thank you for having me, and we're going to nerd out.
Can everybody hear okay?
Yeah.
What? Okay, let's start with talking about, if you all could address it, what's the housing market like now, and what are the embedded opportunities or barriers that you're seeing in your particular realms? Who wants to go first?
I'd love to kick it off. I can't speak for housing in the whole, I can speak for materials and how they're used on homes though. And there's a great opportunity of, I'll pause by telling a story. I was in Altadena recently after the fires, and speaking on a panel, and rather than telling them what to do, every panelist was there to listen and learn. And one of the things I learned from them is, in the wake of the disaster, all the residents of Altadena overnight became construction experts and material experts. And I'm not joking, they really were asking intelligent, poignant questions that people in the industry would never ask. And I was inspired by their drive to want to learn more, want to ask about innovative technologies and how they can rebuild better and faster and safer. So it's a huge opportunity is that the communities I'm encountering in the wake of disaster are wanting to learn more, which is great. One of the barriers I mentioned briefly was the codes aren't there yet. They're still catching up. And from what I've seen, I think that's one of the barriers is the process we use to develop building standards and codes it's good, but it's slower than the innovation. So there might be an opportunity to figure out how to make it quicker.
Let me just segue here. One of the exciting projects we're working on at NIPS right now is developing a housing system certification standard to address just that program. We are shooting, and we will have a pilot standard out by the end of the year. So you all can try it. So Mike, what do you see as embedded opportunities and barriers in the field? And if you want to expand beyond housing.
Well, just with respect to California, I think housing's down something like 13 or something like percent, right? And you see multifamily growing, right? Because we are seeing that shift. It's primarily due to everything you mentioned earlier, right? Insurance, right? Insuring new houses, new construction costs, and when the average I think California average house is like $900,000, right? I live in Cleveland, okay, Cleveland, Ohio, right? We don't have the peaks, we don't have the valleys, right? But it's something that we're dealing with out here in the West Coast, because you certainly hit that peak, which drives multifamily. So that's one of the larger trends. And I think that's where modular plays in really well and really effectively, is building that multifamily better, faster, more cost effective. Because life cycle, you need to also include life cycle costing. The race to the bottom in residential construction, right? And the race to the bottom being cheap, right? I call it this little cheap bird. I don't know how we fight that. We got to fight that through building code, right? Sometimes we apologize with any code officials in here, but sometimes with the code officials, we need to escalate that, and it's tough to enforce that quality on site because we're component-based, right? Everything from architectural down, best-in-class thinking, component-based thinking, and that translates into the residential market because you have individual trades. We're bidding this out line item by line item, right? So you just have divergent ideology here, right? Your aspirations. So the only way to do that is through building code to keep up with it. So I commend NIBS on doing that, because NIBS is helped and done that in the commercial space to bring awareness to air leakage. Creates not only an energy barrier, but air leakage creates a moisture barrier, right? So you think you have an insulated wall system, you got a quarter-inch leak around your electric plug going through the wall, you're losing energy. That's as bad a thermal break as anything else, but I'm diverging a little bit. So, with respect to the residential housing market, it's, I think we have to look at the building code. Again, there's some macro environment things here, right? Like the housing insurance that I can't begin to address, but from the performance of building a house, indoor air quality, no sick houses, the DOD said it to the best. They said, we need this thing to be airtight. We need no mold. We're not afraid to say mold because we're self-insured. And it's right. When you can do that in a hospital and a military installation, let's take that same technology and do it in your house. Why don't you want your kids to be as safe as a patient is in the hospital, right? But we don't. It's that race to the bottom. Build it cheap, build it fast. You got to control that with code.
So I live at that bottom right now. And it sounds like a defense of big developers. I don't necessarily mean it that way, although I have some sympathy. Big picture, this is my perspective around housing is that at a macro level, I kind of go back to like my Econ 101 class, it's supply and demand. As long as all of us like sleeping out of the rain, we're competing for a scarce resource. And so we have got to figure out how we build more houses. Well, it's a little easier said than done, especially as the constraints of builders are adding up. So for a builder right now, they're facing pressure on all four sides, and they're all compounding each other. So one is land costs are going up. Land costs historically might have been 10, 15, 20% of the build. Now it's upward 30, 35, 40. Again, constrained resource. They're all bidding for the same plots, the same communities. The second one is we got hopped up on 0% interest for a while, and so as we are at a more normal historical level for capital costs, that looks like a financing cost increase for them in their pro forma. Material costs are up, and then labor cost is up, and compounding labor cost is also labor availability. So they're in like this 360 ambush. They're getting pressure on all sides to just get an entry-level housing product into the market, and then compounding this is potentially a desire to build that house in a better way, in a better envelope, et cetera. So there's this confluence of events, and so our approach, or what we're trying to do to alleviate some of that pressure, is say, how can we systematize, how can we industrialize this process so you get tighter tolerances, better build quality, and build it better, faster, cheaper than the existing way, because there's just this, they're getting compressed, and so something's got to give, because right now it just, oftentimes builders can't even make the math pencil on a new build, and so it starts to spiral. So to your original question about how bad is it, it's pretty bad, not because we're not building enough, but because we need to build so much more, and the trend line isn't looking great with current variables in play, from my perspective.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Yeah.
So a lot of what you're saying, and it strikes home to me and what I do and what we all do, what you're describing is homes, not just structures. What people are looking for are homes. They're looking for homes and resilience. They want something to last. It's not just let's build something that someone will move out of. And with that, it comes down to, I think all three of us touch on it, how do you keep it affordable? How do you build an affordable home that's resilient and durable? And in the past, it's all about components. It's, let me pick this product, let me pick that product. And what I'm hearing from a lot of architects and specifiers is they're not asking for products, they're asking for solutions. And those solutions could be a product. Those solutions could be a system. Those solutions could be a method. And I think the combination of all together used intelligently is that solution people are asking for to achieve a home and a community rather than just a cheap, quick stick frame house. It's not a house, it's a home. And I think that's where we're all, reading between the lines, I think that's where we're all getting to. And if it's okay with you, I'd love to emphasize that all of what we're talking about today is very much about taking it to the next level. It's not just building structure and moving on. Whether it's through modular or systems approaches and looking at assembly details, or in the case of Hardy, for example, would be innovative materials used in the right method, right place, that provide the solution for different new environments, like in wildfire zones or high wind zones. So the question, I guess, would be, for you in modular, what are ways that you're incorporating other stuff in addition to the method?
It's tricky because I think where we can add the most value is in the stuff customers don't care about. My wife could not care less about the thermal envelope or how the rough electrical or plumbing is done. She cares about the tile, the fixtures, the stuff on the inside, but ultimately that's the stuff that's temporary, that's going to change, 10 years, there's going to be a new style. And so getting the customer, the end family that moves into the home, to care about the stuff that actually really matters from a resilience perspective is tricky, especially when, not to get into the politics, but you've got the K-economy effect of like, I just want to stop being a renter. I want to get my toehold in the market. I want to have that entry-level house. I don't really care what it takes. And so you're seeing customers just kind of say, I don't really care. Get me into a house. I'm going to move out of it in 3 years anyway and hopefully upgrade. So one of the challenges we've had is getting them to care about that. And ultimately, we're fighting a losing battle because there's so much financial pressure. We've almost had to do it because it's the right thing and figure out how to incorporate into the pro forma rather than get them to get excited about it, if that makes any sense. Okay. A little fatalistic. Not necessarily what I wanted, but it's just kind of the reality I'm living right now.
So Why don't you tell us a little bit about your company, what your company does that's in innovation in the market, and if we could do a round robin on that, that would be great.
Sure. I think it's been a bit of a journey, but what the core thesis for what we're trying to do at Tecton OS is we see industrialization or prefabrication kind of like nuclear energy. It's been around. It's been 5 years away for like 70 years. Like, oh, surely this next decade is the one that we're going to start building homes like automobiles. And then fast forward 10 years, like, well, we're exactly where we were. Why? And our belief is that it's really hard to industrialize a system until you know what you're building. And in order to know what you're building, you've got to have a digital twin. You've got to understand it. Well, that might sound like, yeah, Garrett, no kidding, because you guys maybe are in more sophisticated spaces. Lovingly, like we bang rocks together in the field, and that's how we build. And so the idea that you could digitize the entire home and know where all the pieces go, that's completely foreign. And so our company is centered around the idea that if we can, using generative and computational scripts, build a home digitally, and then you can explode it out and then prefabricate it as components, in our case, panels or walls. Now you can start to industrialize and bring it to bear to a customer that says, I don't want the house to really look any different. I just want the process to get there to be better, faster, cheaper. So essentially the secret sauce to what we're doing is taking existing architecture, existing floor plans, and breaking them into Legos so that if you want to build the Death Star one lot, a Barbie doll house the next lot, and a Jeep the lot after, you can still do that from the same building blocks. And you've got a digital engine that allows you to do that time and time again for hundreds of thousands of homes. So we're more of trying to build a prefab operating system rather than trying to become a vertically integrated manufacturer or builder ourselves, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, and for me to comment on that, I love that, the prefabrication, because early in my career I did a lot of high-rise curtain wall, and we've been doing unitized high-rise curtain wall forever. I mean, the last 30 years, right? Which is panelization, right? Panelization is now catching on, and it's just kind of irony. It's coming. Then all of a sudden we hit, air leakage was important until the new executive, well, now it's air leakage isn't important because energy is not important, right? But as far as with respect to innovation, the dirty little secret in the materials industry is the component-based thinking, right? We make the best widget, we make this, but the reality is if it doesn't work in the system, right? Whether the sealant doesn't work in, just take a simple glazing system, your simple window. There could be 7 different manufacturers in there. They have to work in concert as a system, right? So no individual product. The glass doesn't keep the water out. The frame doesn't keep the water out. It's all the materials working together, right? So it really is that system of systems. And so the industry needs to shift from innovation of thinking about components to the system, right? And then this life cycle testing and innovation, right? We worked with NIST and sealants on our sealants side and built life cycle for silicones and urethanes, sealants, right? The most popular used sealants on all of your houses, right? Acrylic, latex, urethane, or silicone. Okay, well, what's the life cycle? Because that plays into innovation. Okay, well, the life cycle is usually built off some type of service or maintenance type, right? If you don't maintain it, it's not going to survive, right? And so we really need to start taking a look at how we maintain materials. And I think we're going to get to that in a little while, but the innovation there, we need to have preventative maintenance. Okay, well, your car has preventative maintenance. Your house needs preventative maintenance as well. Okay, dirt, dust, debris affect how the building operates. Okay, we need to worry about the preventive maintenance of each of those materials. Material manufacturers don't necessarily do that right now. And so you need to request it. Traditionally, warranties will talk about service life. And your service life will be, and your warranty will be null and void if you don't maintain it, right? So it's the owner needs to almost enforce there, but the manufacturers also need to step up, and within Tremco, we're working on doing this. And how do you build preventative maintenance plans? Because I heard that term asset management. Your house is an asset, right? Do you let any other asset sit and rot? Right? No. What do? You try to protect it, right? And that's the same thing we're trying to do with our infrastructure. It's an asset we need to protect, and we need to build that life cycle costing. Warranties are a great way to require that from the manufacturer, because within them, if any of you are specifiers or influence, look at the warranties in detail, because you want a preventative maintenance component in that warranty, because if there's not, the life cycle just can't be there. And then, and how does that play to renewability? The most sustainable building and innovation is how do we reuse and repurpose. So when we innovate materials, we heard about the labor shortage. We literally, to use the term idiot-proof, it's not idiot-proof. These are trained mechanics out in the field, tradespeople, career tradespeople. And what we try to do is simplify the installation that's repeatable, right? We have this, the right-handed mechanic versus the left-handed mechanic, and I use mechanic because they're tradespeople and they really are mechanics of their skill. Do they do it differently? We need repeatable details, repeatable installation instructions to address all this, because the greatest innovation installed improperly isn't going to work. And so innovation is a really tough one, because you really have to take the blinders off that financial equation of, hey, I'm going to develop this molecule, right? And we put this in this, and next thing you know, we got a great product. That great product has to work in with the system. Georgia systems, I love that. Every 5 years, it's coming in the next 5 years. Well, I've stuck around NIBS long enough that I've actually see stuff get codified. ASHRAE 90.1 was a great example, which changed the building industry, because that mandated both continuous installation as well as AVB, air vapor barriers on buildings, which drove a lot of building code.
Very cool. As a lefty, that touched my heart. You do things.
They both think they're right.
Of course. Alex, how about you?
So it's interesting to touch on that. The innovation, we're recognizing that systems are important. For us, it's a little complicated, because on expert cladding or interior finishes, all the different products we carry, we don't own all of it. And so it's how do you develop a system where there might be 4, 5, 10 other manufacturers' products that are part of that system. So it's difficult for us, but we're working on it. And when we looked at that and looked at what customers are needing and the low-hanging fruit, so to speak, we noticed that installation was one of the hurdles. And so a lot of what we've done recently is we've investigated through time studies and the R&D scientists can speak way better to it. But we've quantified every motion of how you take product off the pallet, work with it, put it on the house, clean up the job site. Every aspect has been digitally monitored and quantified, so we can identify for the installers that use our product where they can improve their efficiency. And in some cases, you don't need 2, 3 people to do it. You can do it with 2 if you move your station from here to there. And by working with the installation crews and training them in different ways on how to install and the process of doing so, it translates to better install, but more efficient, quicker, longer lasting, because it's done right, which is one of the major difficulties manufacturers face. And that translates to the homeowners being more satisfied. And we have anecdotal cases, because we're just kicking it off, where homeowners end up reaping the rewards by ending up paying less for the product. And while we're working on the systems, which is complicated, approaching how it's done, we found to be a really great way to address customer concerns of how do we use this great product how can I make it more affordable? And by working with the installers, partnering with them, learning from them, and then filtering it back to them of where they can improve, we found that was a great innovation in just this past year.
That's really cool. Do you do like mock-ups of how you do it?
I'm trying to be careful of what I can disclose. So in early stages, we do stuff in our R&D facility. That's actually in Fontana, California. That's our North American Innovation Center. We'll do small scale stuff in our facility there, and then we'll bring it up to larger scale full structures in the field to confirm that things are accurate. But we do have specifically designed mock-ups that address all the nuances, all the details that you might encounter on a house, the complicated bits. Mm-hmm. If you just have a plain 10 by 10 wall, it doesn't tell you anything. Well, what about if I have this window or this weird feature, penetration? Those are the things that we've added to it to make sure that we're identifying not the 80%, oh, it's easy to do, but the 20% that really end up delaying the job.
Got it.
So.
Mike, let's talk a little bit about O&M.
Oh, yeah, so with respect to the O&M, I kind of touched on it, preventive maintenance and warranties. But I had a comment that, yesterday we heard the word P3, right? And this public-private partnerships, I had an opportunity to work on a project at the University of Toronto with Ellis Don, and it was a P3. They wanted a 30-year design life. I've worked on 2 other projects that had over, traditional design life for architectural was 20 years. They wanted a 30-year, and University of Wisconsin wanted a 100-year, and we've had several hospital groups approach us that they want 50-year life cycles. We're like, this is great. You're going to have to redo stuff. They're like, yeah, we need to build it in the original P3 because we're going to build it in the budget. And it was like, so you go through this exercise, and then the University of Toronto was intimately involved with, and it was very enlightening that they want to know what to do, right? Ellis Down was on the hook, so the construction manager had to maintain it for the next 30 years. So they didn't want to miss anything. You hand it over to the owner wouldn't have known what to do without this risk. It was really risk management for the owner handing it to them, because the builder now said, hey, what do we need to do? So we sat down by line item and we addressed not just the components, but the systems, right? Certain paints, right? Your window systems have 10-year paints or 20-year glass, right? When do we need to replace it, right? Well, right now we build buildings, and I just looked at a school in Ohio, hasn't been recaulked since 1976. The original ceiling, it was rotted out, birds, whatever, but it just gaping holes in the school. There was no point. So building this P3 mentality of preventative maintenance in this public-private partnership was innovative, because when you need to recaulk, you need to replace the glass, right? No, glass is probably going to be good, right, for 50 years, right? We're replacing. I got glass in Columbia University in New York City. We're actually reusing the original glass from the 1860s. We're remaking the windows with the original glass. We're taking off the original iron frames and reusing the glass. You want to talk about sustainability, they also have the money. It's not cheap. I also hired Gordon Smith to do this as well, so we're rather expensive fix. But this whole concept of building preventative maintenance into your building up front, it's a known cost. We know it. We all know it. Okay, it's not a secret, but the owner is blind to it, right? And even in this case, the owner wiped their hands of it because they just gave it to someone else to maintain. Okay, but if we use those same principles, we know the life cycles materials. Okay, I can tell you, I know the Achilles heel, everyone. I know the strengths of it, right? I know the weaknesses and strengths of urethane. And silicones, I know the strengths. It's an alloy. Silicone's a great material, right? Innovation is not going to, the next step of innovation in the construction is not going to come through probably a molecule. It's going to come through systems development. It's going to be industry collaboration. It's going to be partners like us sitting together and us helping each other, and then jointly, and then that's going to benefit the marketplace. But that preventive maintenance, it's a blind spot to the owner, mostly because we hand the GC, if it's not done with CM at risk, that's what most of Med and Fed is done with a construction manager. You get a 1-year, basically, defect warranty, right? And the owner thinks that they have a 100-year building. They don't know that the architect's design life is 20 years. It's a disconnect. You need to either make them aware and or build it in the contract.
Well, that's 20 years with the maintenance. Assuming the building is being maintained is 20 years.
This was a 30.
Yeah. Funny, just you reminding me, I was in a Home Depot recently. I looked at the tool aisle, and I ended up not buying it because I was looking at the fine print and it said oil daily or it voids warranty. And I was like, no one's going to oil this thing daily.
What tool was it? Was it a battery card?
No, it's an air tool.
Oh, okay.
But I was like, I think to the maintenance thing, it's I guess manufacturer's responsibilities to make it reasonable. We can have the fine print and the warranty and all that, but if a homeowner or building owner has to go way out of their way and oil daily, not really a maintenance plan. Are there any things that your company's doing to inform or provide information to say, okay, here's what you need to maintain, here's the lifetime, how often you have to do it, Do you provide schedules, or is that something?
We do with our warranties, we do provide schedules. We call the owners and let them know. It's a business opportunity selfishly, but it also, we know, like I said, we know the Achilles heels. I mean, we literally talked about landing rockets on that. It's been a great quote. We put a man on the moon, but we can't disclose how long our materials are going to work. That's unfortunately, this is the world we live in because we get sued quite a bit as well, right? And it's not our fault. Right, but we get brought into this litigious thing. But getting specifically to the maintenance, preventative maintenance, owner education, that's where we need to start. Building higher performance allows the preventative maintenance because, George's other comment, it's either growth or decay, right? And that's literally the building. It's either performing or it's in decay, right? Because while it's performing, the minute there's a breach, the breach is just going to get worse, right? And you're not going to find that leak in the roof or that leak in the wall system or the leak in your HVAC traditionally goes too late. Preventative maintenance is done by inspection, and this budding field of building closure, consultants and scientists is just reaffirming that, right? Every owner's hiring, but we're fixing 50 years, 100 years of bad crap right now, and so hopefully we can cross that bridge in the next 20 years.
How do you get the owners interested, or at least savvy enough to know that this seems like something you definitely should do?
I'll say that with in limited cases with wildland and urban interface areas, there's a lot of discussion of trying to get regional inspectors to go and inspect for gutters, inspect for vegetation on a regular basis. A lot of communities I've talked to don't think they can afford that because it's a lot of ask for the community, for the municipality. I think a number of guidelines on how to build and maintain a home does say, here's how to maintain your defensible space. Here's how to make sure to clean your gutters. If you're not able to climb ladders, when you have a gutter, install a metal gutter guard to prevent the accumulation and extend the maintenance cycle where you don't have to maintain yearly, but maybe every 5 years. To be honest, I don't know. I think there's a huge opportunity for improvement on how experts can educate the public on what to do, when, and how. Across the board, and I'll use the fire example as what I've seen recently, but it applies everywhere.
I think people who have been hit by floods sort of get the idea. Maybe we should get together with get together with BOMA and start pushing this kind of thing. So, Garrett, to pivot to you, do you have examples in your work of innovations that work particularly well in housing and projects?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that we found in the residential space is resi's the frog in the proverbial pot of water. It's got to start pretty tepid, otherwise that frog jumps right out. And I say this lovingly, like amongst the technology cohorts, there's some really cool stuff around 3D printing and all this space age stuff, but the problem is that water is way too hot for the frog, and the builder's like, what am I supposed to tell my customer with a Corian wall? Like, they don't even know what to do with that. They're expecting drywall. So like, you can tell me all the engineering and the material science benefits of this new thing, but it's just too far out. And so it sounds really elementary, but one of the greatest innovations we found is start by meeting the customer where they are, so they don't really have to change behavior. And when we do that, now you've earned the right to be heard, and you can start to slowly crank up the water. And then you can micro-innovate your way forward to the point where eventually now you've actually built something that's radically better. But we've found that if we try to stretch the customer or stretch the industry too far too soon, we run into immense headwinds. And so while a little bit underwhelming, that's actually one of the greatest innovations. Happy to talk about robotics and automation and AI and technology, but like ironically, the social innovation of just meet them where they are has been the most effective.
Interesting. What are those first steps towards innovation when you have you meet them where they are?
I think that the first step is before we start talking about industrialization and physical automation, let's start with getting to basics around what a cohesive architecture set looks like. And again, this might sound plebeian, but the reality is in residential construction, the architect is tremendously neutered. It's a commodity. Yeah, just throw some stuff on a PDF. It's really the structural engineer going to work it from there. And frankly, even then, it's the field. The framer's going to build it however he wants. The electrician's going to do whatever he wants. Nobody's going to stop them. So really, one of the things that we're trying to do is bring the architectural, what an architect used to be is kind of this master of ceremonies back to residential. And the way that we do that is by, our firm is both architecture and engineer licensed. So we wrap those together so that there's no latency. And we put it all into one single digital package. So there is a single source of truth. That has been huge. And so as an example of micro innovation, the trades aren't going to sit there and pull out my AR app on the phone and do all that doesn't matter. What we did that worked really well recently, we said, hey, there's a company out there, there's a couple companies that will take like the Roomba that we all have at home that cleans out the vacuum. It's a version of that allows you to print on the slab. So we said, hey, we're going to take architectural and engineering sets. We're going to send that file digitally to this robot, and it printed on the slab everything that we wanted. So QR codes and labels, and that was a huge eye-opener. It's not rocket science, it's just printing on concrete. But the fact that this digital intent that the architect and engineer had created could translate, and you could show me where my step-ups are and where my walls are supposed to go, was immensely valuable as a starting point on the journey towards what the future can look like. And so it didn't require them to change their behavior. It saved them time and energy because they're not out there snapping lines, et cetera. But it showed them what a digitally native construction future can look like. And I think that started the ball rolling.
Very cool. I have heard from, mostly from a friend in the construction company, that drawings are getting worse from architectural engineers. They're just cranking through, and they're not.
Nobody's looking at them. The building department's not looking at them. The trades aren't looking at it. It's like the Pirates of the Caribbean quote. They're not really rules. They're more like guidelines. Like, it's intent. Just figure it out on the site.
And another challenge there is the two-dimensional. To get building performance, you need to focus on the details, which is the connections, where like and dislike materials on the building come together, and all those have to be extruded in three-dimensional, right? And you talked about the digital twin, and from those three-dimensional details, because how do you I talked about the right-hand, left-hand, or mechanic installing. How do you read that detail? There is no installation. You see 5, 6 different materials overlap. You're seeing a cross section. You don't have any idea. When we extrude, we do it project specific. We actually give them an installation set of built up extruded 3D details for critical connections, right? So you want this corner of the roof has to take 220 mile an hour uplift or wind load, right? Or you need different, right? Fireproofing. Those systems are tested. They have to be very prescriptive how they're installed. We give them a two-dimensional detail and say, figure this out, right? The burden's on us to supply that to the architects, but it's also a challenge for the whole industry. It's like, no, this static drawing doesn't talk to me about the critical integration. This is why building enclosure commissioning, and if we can get the commissioning standards within the residential, it helps because those, there is a light form of commissioning. I heard Georgia was doing blower door testing on all new residential houses now, right? I can guarantee you when that came, when I did my first Army barracks out in Fort Leavenworth, and the general contractor out of Minneapolis had the air leakage test from the Corps of Engineers, they were concerned, right? You put an air leakage test, because the air leakage, very prescriptive, it has to pass this. That means you had to do everything else right, to pass this air leakage, because otherwise you're going to be ripping off cladding. And what does that drive? It drives pre-con. That's how you solve almost. We're pre-con. I can stress one thing: residential construction doesn't have a lot of pre-con.
I don't even know if they know what that is.
Yeah. So we need to.
What is it?
So yeah, and so pre-construction is one of the best things I think that we can do, and then you do the pre-construction based off the commissioning. Is the commissioning talks specifically to the critical areas, right? Because we've always commissioned what, HVAC, plumbing, right? Ingress, egress, fire safety. Well, the enclosure is just as important.
I think we all intuitively know an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And sometimes you're just in the hamster wheel and it gets lost. And I think even going a step further to some of the conversations around preventive maintenance, architecture, and material science, I think one of the trends that we will start to see at some point is this concept of poka-yoke, where these systems start to get built in a way that it's very difficult to get it wrong in the field. In other words, the wiring harness in our car, you can't put it in backwards. And so as more and more thought goes into the architect and the pre-con, the material, it will make it easier and faster for the installer to put together. And ultimately, it will make it easy. It will make it harder to install it incorrectly and wrong, which then leads to the warranty and all the other stuff. So I think that's probably a step further down the road, but I think we'll start to see that a little bit more.
And my history working in modular back in the day, but one thing I love about it is those concepts that were never applied to construction were always applied to modular, because it was a different set of people, a different group of people in the room solving problems. And they took the knowledge they had from other industries going, well, when I developed the software, we wanted to foolproof it. And so they started applying these external concepts. So part of the innovation I saw in modular was, okay, well, it's not just a really well-trained guy who knows what he's doing with the hammer, it's a computer geek. It's going, well, this applied for this over here, maybe it'll work for how we design this wall panel or how we connect them. And I think that's, for me, I'm inspired by how I've seen modular be much more multidisciplinary than traditional construction. And I don't know if that's what the world of construction needs, but I think modular has that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Let's talk about the end user. How do you get them involved and at what scale?
So for us, we're a product manufacturer, and for a long time people think, okay, well, I'm a manufacturer, so my user is the distributor who pays us the money. Well, yeah, but the distributor's not going to buy it if the installer doesn't pick it up and buy it, and then they're not going to do it if the homeowner doesn't. So we've identified the whole chain of customers and users of our product, upstream and downstream. And well, it's actually one of our company values. One of our company values is begins and ends with the customer. When we develop new systems, new products, even new marketing pitches, we ask ourselves, who is the person, people, or groups that we're looking to support or help? And then we work our way backwards, try to figure it out, and then once we think we figured it out in R&D or wherever, bring it back to them. We have a really nice, strong insights team that takes concepts that we have, just concepts, and brings it out to the field, does interviews, gathers feedback from the potential user groups, and asks them, does this solve your pain point? We've identified your pain point. Does this solve it? Yes, no? If not, well, why not? What is it missing? If it does, how can we make it better? And as a product manufacturer, I think it's a great step in the right direction of, it's not just we're making a product and selling it. We're making a product because we care about how it's interpreted, how it's used, how it's perceived by the user. We want them to like it. And that's something that, for me in my history, I think I have not seen that at other companies. So I'm excited that I see it at James Hardie.
What kind of cost implication does doing that work have on your bottom line? You know?
Well, I can't speak to all the details, but the minimal input cost to make something that people want, I think is well worth it.
All right, I will throw one out to anybody who wants to answer it. Have you seen unintended consequences of being innovative, either in the field or to your company? Somebody wants to say.
Well, I'll just tee it up is that, when you take a look at innovation in materials, right, we traditionally look at it from a laboratory out, at least, is from a materials manufacturer. But what we have to recognize is the different in the changing design and for instance, a brick mass wall. I used to live in a warehouse in downtown Cleveland. 2,000 square feet could hold 50 gallons of water. Okay, I mean, I'm talking about 20-inch brick mass wall. Okay, a just a standard house can only handle about 5 gallons in that same 2,000 square feet. Okay, so we have this legacy that walls have kind of self-managed all this over the years. We come out with these new technologies, and then we're like, oh, the unintended consequences, we need to manage all this water, because that same 50 gallons of water is hitting that 2,000 square foot of wall. Where is it going now? What's going in the house? It's going in your cladding. It's going in, it's rotting out the structure from the inside. So the unintended consequence of, hey, we built a great material. Well, the material doesn't necessarily match that, and it goes kind of back to that systems, right? So you can't innovate further than the design, right? Because sometimes we put literally spaceship materials in something that we could have got away with Play-Doh. Right, so.
You know, to follow up on that and build upon it, for me, I have a personal passion of a holy grail of designing an exterior wall system that addresses moisture management, energy efficiency, fire, all the hazards from the exterior. And the best solution you can get for moisture probably is not the greatest for fire. So like a rain screen system is now a chimney, and it's a flue that will suck the fire up. You close everything off to prevent embers from getting in. Well, that's bad for moisture. So how do you balance what your risks are, and how do you design a system that addresses all the risks, not just the one? And so I think the unintended consequence of solving for one really, really well leads to negatives in other aspects.
We've seen it with airtight envelopes causing all kinds of interior problems.
Yep.
I say this lovingly because I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, but my team is largely engineers. So the unintended consequences are rarely technical ones. They're almost always social. We live in certain lines, and we're like, we thought of all these things like, yeah, but Billy Bob doesn't like it that way. His granddad taught him to do it a different way. Like, you're not going to bludgeon him with the book of code. So I like wearing these hats, and so I find that one of the unintended consequences that we are constantly managing is, by definition, innovation is disruption. And if there's disruption, somebody's livelihood, somebody's pocketbook, somebody's P&L is getting hurt, and it's trying to figure out and forecast how to get out in front of that. Is it the actual worker? Is it the builder? Is it the customer? Is it the person that the builder's working for? And so the unintended consequences for us tend to be largely social dynamics, because many people in the residential mafia, so to speak, or the ecosystem, have a lot to gain from the status quo. And so as we talk about architecture, we talk about materials, more often than not, the material innovation comes at a cost premium with a labor reduction that is exceeding that. Whether you can capture that labor reduction remains to be seen, because there is a recalcitrance or an incumbency to that labor in the field that's hard to pull those dollars back. But I'd say most of the time, our unintended consequences is it all made sense in the spreadsheets, and then the reality didn't survive first contact in the field with the trades and the ecosystem.
Let's put it in a little and talk about.
You can be more obvious, but hey, you guys in the corner, get it up.
Be proud, Julia. I'll hold up that 10 minutes to go. Okay, one more question, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Actually, we have a little bit of a few extra minutes. My last question to you is, what are the most important gaps that we can work together, either through this or through other affiliations, to fill long-term and short-term to improve the housing?
I'll just testing, system testing in housing market document to demonstrate that life cycle, right? I'm going to say a lot here. Demonstrate that life cycle, because you are paying a premium for these materials, and we have to pay for it through lights. So that's education, right? So I think it's a lot of education, and education comes from proving it out, right? Which is systems testing, and building a house and showing out and documenting. Hey, you're going to save this much money. Here's what here's where the real value is, right? And that's, when we looked at lead, it was only 5% more to build a lead, okay? 5%. Okay, the energy savings would have been offset, but no one looked at it that way, okay? And in post-occupancy studies, some of the lead buildings didn't perform as prescriptive, but the ones that did, okay, far outweighed that. So again, and that came through testing, which documented the performance, and the performance was able to be shared through life cycle and cost.
I'm a dumb jock at heart, so I'm not equipped to talk policy or really pontificate, but I would say I think the biggest thing that we can collectively do is properly articulate, and I'm again looking at this through a very small pinhole lens from the bottom, but properly articulate the value of what we're each providing in the lexicon of the customer. And I would say, given the macroeconomic situation of the country and the world right now, cost is really a dominant component. And I think, speaking for myself and for my team, where we step on it sometimes, and I think this is more common, is we don't properly articulate the value in dollars and cents. We tend to say why it's better and it's faster and these other things, but sometimes it's remarkable how much we have to lead the horse to water to explain to them, hey, here's how it's going to affect your pro forma. You're going to get an extra turn on capital, and it's going to lead to this. And it's like making it so easy that they can't resist it. And so I think that's something that we can all collectively do is better narrow that and make it very, very easy for them to understand why we're recommending you were doing X, now do Y.
Absolutely. It's all about education. It's education about things that people aren't familiar with or used to. It's education to counter the misinformation that's being sent out there. On our side of the business, instinctually people will have a little bit of mistrust, and we go back to yesterday's talk about mistrust. If a salesperson comes up and says, "Oh, have I got a deal for you?" You're gonna instinctually go, "Oh, I'm not sure about that." So I think a great way to work with NIBS is to further build that education out as a neutral, independent party, to using the science, using the data to say, no, really, here's what the situation is, and properly educating and informing about the new materials, the new technologies, the new systems, and helping homeowners understand. I want to circle back to the Altadena. They had to go through a tragedy to try to learn and become experts. I think working with NIBS, maybe we can educate before a tragedy strikes. And that would be a fantastic thing that I think everyone would be willing to work together on. So.
That sounds great to me. We will do it. So, questions from the audience, please.
Hello, I'm Lino with American Institute of Architects. What we often focus on is larger scale development, multifamily, government institutional housing, universities, etc. And part of that is because of this, the scale and enough of a market driving, a market signal for manufacturers, production lines to develop enough of the material, enough of the fixings to then drive down affordability, and the costs, or drive up affordability, I guess, make it more affordable. And so when we're looking at retrofits, or whether it's a decentralized form of energy or clean energy, secondary glazing systems, whatever it is, we have a fragmented market. And we have a diverse array of stakeholders with different interests. And some of the solutions that I see therein is in the realm of like joint acquisition, joint procurement. And so I'm kind of curious as to like what sort of solutions, facilitators to create more of that so that we can scale the resilience economy or the retrofit economy and have enough on bulk orders essentially to signal to the market so that we can scale some of these technologies, innovations to a commercialization and drive down the costs there. If this any ideas, I'd love to hear.
The collaboration, the joint ventures, with the construction managers at the federal level is a great example of that, how the design teams have come together. You take two competing and but then it really kind of breaks out to one student administrative, one student building, right? It's really not as shared. I will say you do see quite a bit of that with the trades. You're seeing GCs probably more and more self-perform, probably because of this labor issues, right? GCs are now, I'm not a general contractor or material supplier, but we're seeing a lot of them have prefabrication plants. Why? Because you get better quality in plant. Modular, I'm 100% on board with that. Because it's prefabricated. Construction tolerance is on site, right? An 1/8 inch here, 1/8 inch there, an 1/8 inch there. Pretty soon you got an inch going down to the window, and then that window wasn't designed to have an extra inch opening there, right? Okay, well, little secret, windows take up all the tolerances. But to force that collaboration, the system performance, that scares the crap out of So from the AIA standpoint, working that into the architects and making sure that they're able to enforce the performance requirements, right? Because you force, the challenge is the AIA's, you got the project architect that does the work, and the specifier says, I gave you best in class. Well, I can tell you, I could take B products and make an A building. Okay, so best in class isn't necessarily, still want to make them provide those three, don't give us off. But you can take, and you do that through system and performance testing. Mock-ups force that collaboration. Okay, we have a mock-up facility, you talked about testing, we have a mock-up facility, we have a full wall. We don't certify the test, but we do have an accredited wall. And we bring in, and by forcing that, you force the collaboration. And we host general contractors, architects, and the subs that actually build it. And so that's how you force it, is the mock-up. And you can mock up walls, you can mock up floors, you can mock up installs. There was, the museum in Kansas City, Nelson Atkins, we had an on-site mock-up that every day when the tradespeople walked by, this is what it's supposed to look like. Remember that. That forces them to work together, right? Mock-ups. So that would be one tool for AIA.
I can vouch for that too, in having seen GSA put together some courthouses.
Yeah. And
they get the judges in there and do the mock-ups, and it's just like, I know that's what I said, but that's not what I want. Please.
As some of you know, I designed a new modular system, and one of the ways that conceptually I worked on it was to combine 5 components into one panel. So that does reduce the labor costs quite a bit. And also, like you said, it's considered fireproof, it's waterproof, it's all those other elements that have to be reinterpreted. And of course, now I'm going through the ICC process to prove that what I did does work. But the other thing that I wanted to emphasize was at one point I was working with FEMA with the idea that, again, the SAM panel doesn't take any maintenance, doesn't need siding, doesn't need roofing, doesn't ever need to be painted. And we were trying to put together a program where, because of the long term, again, looking at the long-term life of the panel system, the government would actually subsidize the mortgage at 3%. So they would take a look at the income of the people, say, okay, you can afford to pay $200 a month. They would subsidize that mortgage so that they would have a longer term, long-lasting structure. And of course, it would last a fire, it would last a flood, it would last through, so it didn't have to be rebuilt. So it's looking at the long-term approach. And of course, then FEMA has its own issues, which I hear are not as bad as they sound, but but that type of program, so it's a joint effort between creating a long-lasting product, a product that can't be destroyed, and then recognizing that and having a joint effort between the public and the private to subsidize that so that it was based on the income of the user with a little bit of help from the government. And that was, I thought, for a while, for about a year, was a really interesting program that we're trying to introduce. That maybe when the next FEMA gets survives, can be reinstituted. But again, it was cost savings came with, took about 1/2 as much time to build a house because there were so fewer trades that were involved. It was all integrated into the one panel system.
Question?
In the beginning of the panel, you were talking a lot about the value of having, materials that last a really long time and improving, Michael, I think you talked about the race to the bottom. As somebody who's looking to purchase my first home in California, something that I see a lot and that I believe is a larger trend is that a home is no longer a home, it's an investment tool. And you say people are looking for a home and a place to live, but that's not really the case in California. Investors are looking for an asset that they're not going to live there, so they don't care. They're going to rent it out, and if it falls apart, they're going to write it off as a loss, and that's going to serve as a financial benefit to them as well. So how are you seeing real estate investment companies impacting build quality in the residential space?
I can take it first stab at what I'm seeing. Can't paint with a broad brush. Everybody's unique. I think it depends on the owner. What's their timeline? If I'm going to hold this asset for 30 years because I'm a build-for-rent developer, I have a strong incentive to see that build quality because I'm going to pay a huge price. If I'm going to hold on to it for 5 years, I'm betting that I can just kind of put some lipstick on it and resell it in 6. I don't really care. And so while I wish there was a greater sense of purpose to that investor, I think it's 100% for them ROI based on how long they're going to hold it. And so I'd probably I'm overgeneralizing, but 2 buckets. Like a long-term BFR strategy probably leans a little bit heavier towards quality. If it's just a flipper mentality, if I'm going to get in on whatever the silly acronym is, build, rent, rehab, something, whatever it is, and then they're going to get rid of it by, probably not very heavy care on that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a challenge because I'm familiar with that, and I know there's a lot of opinions on whether people if corporations should even be allowed to do that, right? Yeah, that's a challenge. That's going to come back to the insurance companies because there's somebody left holding the bag, and unfortunately, it's the cause for action may be a widespread sick home syndrome or something like that with these massive owners that don't maintain their houses because they will go bad. Hey, go.
Questions?
But we wish we could help you out. Give you that comfort. Now,
I actually won't even look at anything that was built in the 80s. So if anybody was around in the 80s, I don't know what you guys were thinking. Building, sorry, but your gigantic roofs and your huge windows, they're incredibly inefficient. I can't afford that electricity.
Kind of a 2-part question comment. I'm actually in the public sector, and I'm a building patrol guy. So what you guys are talking about is awesome. I love it. I kind of consider myself the new guard, new age thinking. But from the comment standpoint, I'd love to get exchange info with you, Alex and Garrett. But from a question standpoint, recently, starting January or at least October of last year, the state passed Assembly Bill 130, which is through the budget process, which froze the code cycle for residential units. It's kind of 50-50 throughout the industry. My colleagues, some love it, some hate it. I'm on the fence of, I think it's going to help us let the industry catch up, like you were saying earlier. The building industry catch up to the code cycles. The code cycles is constantly changing, especially on the energy side. I was curious if you guys have seen any impact or effect on the cost of building yet. I know it's new, it's only 4 months into it, but from that standpoint, if you have any comments on that.
That particular bill I can't speak to, but I do know, well, I don't know, but my hunch is across the country there's bills, codes, ordinances that can always have an impact, not just to manufacturers, but to homeowners as well. And in some cases, I won't speak to which city, but there's one city, they had a good intent, but the way it was written ended up stifling choice and almost forcing the owners, if it had gone through, it would have forced owners to only be allowed the most expensive option. And the intent of that particular ordinance was great intent, just not written clear enough so that the interpretation of inspectors would have been, no, you have to have this. It costs 30 times as much. I think that's an opportunity where inspectors and officials maybe can work with us and with the politicians and others to make sure that the language that's written in that world, the non-code world, is understandable to the code folks. I see a lot of opportunities. Maybe after this we can talk in the hall and use more vulgarity about what's going on.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm on the complete opposite side of that. The city I work for, I'm in Cathedral City, which is next to Palm Springs.
Yeah.
We're very blue collar, and to your point, we're striving to get that affordable cost. We're 70% Hispanic community out there, so a lot of the people that work in our city and community, they leave the valley to go work so they can make that wage, so they can afford something. So when you start talking modulars and everything like that, I think that's kind of, within this last year, we've been seeing a lot of people come into us to a building and planning department with the alternative building materials and saying, what can we do with this? The problem is, our hands are tied to an extent. I am all ears, bring it in. I will review it and I'll look at it. It's to the point where the building code, what is it allowing us to do? What is my interpretation? Does it allow me to do this? And that's where I have to be optimistic and I have to have that open thinking of, people come in now all the time with some plans and they say, these are container buildings. I look at them like, that's not a container building. And they say, yeah, and they show it to me. It looks like an extremely modern building, but it's container house, container building. So these are the types of things that I'm very interested in, because now our planning commission is coming to me directly and my boss, and they're saying, why can't we make this a standard? I said, it's very sticky if you start making that stuff standard, and allowing it to come through like that. So that's why this is the hammer and nail stuff, kind of nerding out on this stuff that you guys are talking about. So I appreciate it.
On that, it's materials, it's methods. Because a lot of this is so new, a company that makes one good, new, innovative product, there'll be a replicate which is nowhere close to that quality. So standardizing it at early stages is, like you said, sticky. Groups like ICES that you mentioned earlier, sir, are trying to help with that. But the certification process is not easy, it's not quick, and it's not cheap. So the certification process as well is holding back some opportunity for innovation, and that might be another opportunity for NIFS to support those new ideas, new products, to bring them to a point where they can be evaluated appropriately.
Can I just make a comment about the cost of materials?
Sure.
I deal with it every day. Between, quite frankly, the fires, not only fires, like I said, destroying LA, but really probably that was maybe 10% of the fires that occurred around this country. But also, if you look at Canada, Canada had huge fires. So, A, there's a shortage of wood. And B, somebody put tariffs on Canada, which where most of our steel comes from, and most of our wood comes from in the construction industry.
Who did?
I didn't mention any name, but if you talk about the cost, that's a major cost. I know plywood in my area is up 25%.
Wow.
Okay. How many houses need plywood or wood studs? And so that is a major factor. So the whole idea of alternative modular pieces is more efficient to build with. You have a lot less waste, but your cost is still going up because of that. And again, what we talked about, the ICCS system is a very expensive process to go through.
One last question.
I'm on the AIA Housing Steering Committee for the state of California, and we're looking for processes to make things run smoother and faster. And this might tie into the building official question. We're really pushing for a state appeals board because we have 58 counties, we have hundreds of cities. We'll submit drawings to different cities and get completely different interpretations from permitters. And if we could appeal that to a state agency like the fire department does, there could be some broader standard accepted practices that might give you more leeway or support. So that's one thought. Any thoughts on that? Or do you have any thoughts that we could bring to legislators to streamline housing?
So it's funny you bring that up. Actually, 2 weeks ago, I was testifying in front of some of the WICs up in Sacramento, and they're really pushing this. And that was one of the things that I specifically asked for was like, hey, there's 517 or whatever AHJs in California. Like, we can only fight the alternative means and methods fight so many times. Is there a way we can centralize the learning at the state level? I think that landed really well because they're looking for cost-effective ways to help add jet fuel to this conversation around industrialization. So I believe, I will not speak for them, but I believe there is a significant push towards thinking about how they can centralize some of that learning. So I would be surprised if we don't see something like that coming up in the next couple of cycles.
If you all want to nerd out on how to do more, I think I'll recommend the next panel, which is coming up at 1:20. Derek, if you want to give it a little plug.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to talk a lot about AI, digital twins, so get into the technical aspects of all those and see how they're transforming the industry.
It's time for lunch, but before we go, let's give a big round of applause.